Unidos. Se llama Ken Seagall, que no tiene nada que ver con Steven Seagal, que habló mal de nosotros en alguna película, ¿se acuerdan de eso? Bueno, gracias a Genexus Consulting vamos a tener una traducción simultánea de esta exposición porque Ken únicamente habla en inglés. Lideró el equipo de la legendaria campaña Think Different y estableció la I, o la I, como se dice en inglés, en Apple al nombrar iMac o iMac. Autor del bestseller Insanely Simple and Simple del New York Times, su Twitter es @kseagall, S-E-G-A-L-L. Nos va a hablar sobre Think Simple. Está bien dicho, ¿no? ¿Sí? Adelante, Ken Seagall.
Well. Hi there. This is visit number 2 to Uruguay for me, so I'm very happy. The memory of coming back. It's a really, really beautiful place, and I've been treated so warmly by the sponsors here. They were kind enough to arrange today's weather for me. That was good. Normally, for the last couple of years, I've been starting with a little Donald Trump joke. I can no longer do that, unfortunately. So, and believe me, it hurts me more than it does you. So, maybe meet back here in another 4 years and we can start being funny again. Anyway, first a little tiny bit about me, because I didn't understand the introduction. My story is that I worked on Apple for 4 years when Steve Jobs came back to the company in 1997. I was the ad agency creative director. Before that, though, I was no stranger to Steve because I worked with him for 8 years as his creative director on Next Advertising. You know his story. That was the company he started when he was forced out of Apple. So basically, I worked with Steve for a total of 12 years. And over that time, I'm very happy to report, you've heard what a rough guy he could be. During those 12 years, he only beat me up twice. Very, very good record. I'm proud of that. And it gets even better if you annualize that number, 0.167 beatings per year. So I actually did pretty well compared to what a lot of people experienced at the hands of Steve. I also worked with these other companies, and to be honest, they were a lot more complicated than Apple. Dell and Intel in particular made things very rough. Things would take at least 2 or 3 times as long to accomplish. We'd spend more time and more money doing it, and the end product wasn't nearly as good. So my inspiration to write a book about simplicity, which is what I did, actually came largely from these guys because it was such a different world than Apple's, and it struck me that there was a much, much better way to work in the land of Apple. So, before we begin, I have a little bit of a warm-up exercise I do because I know you need a little warming up. It's the end of the day. I have a gift. I would have brought a few hundred gifts, but I didn't have room. So I have a little quiz, an interactive quiz I'm going to lay on you. And the winner of the quiz gets this fabulous gift, which is my new book. Sorry, it's the best I could do. But I'm going to put a multiple choice test up here because along the way today I've got some little behind the scenes stories that might amuse you or inform you in a certain way. So I'm going to give you this question. You have 5 choices. Whoever is the lucky winner gets the fabulous gift. And the question is this. Back in 2008, I believe it was, when the iPhone was introduced, we didn't know for sure whether we could use the name iPhone because Cisco actually had a product called iPhone and claimed to own the word. There was, behind the scenes, there was negotiations going on, but basically every other week it would be, we're using iPhone, we're not using iPhone, back and forth. we had to be ready with other names. So I'm going to put 5 names up here. 4 of them were names that were serious contenders. If we couldn't be iPhone, we probably would have been one of these other 4 names. The other name, the 5th one, was made up for this occasion. Therefore, if you can find the bad name, then you get the fabulous gift. So without further ado, 5 names that could have been iPhone. First is Moby, which would have been short for mobile, only a few characters shorter, but every character counts. 2 would be iTalk. Remember, this came after the incredible success of iPod, so everybody knew that Apple was working on a phone and it was going to be another iThing, perhaps. Nobody knew that for sure. Another idea would be tripod, because it was 3 things in one coming after the iPod. It was a phone, an internet device, and a music player. So 3 in 1. Another idea would have been telepod, because it was 2 things in one. It was the marriage of the phone and the iPod. And last, could it be possible 3 years before the iPad was actually unveiled to the public, could it be that Apple thought of that name to be the iPhone? Who knows? Stranger things have happened. So now, I give you a moment to ponder which of these names was not considered. Okay, that's your warm-up music. By show of hands, we must maintain decorum here, so anyone want to take a guess? Just give me a 1 through 5. Someone here, maybe, be bold. It's a free gift, come on. Hands, anyone? There's 2 people there. The woman, I think that's a woman, has got long hair. Pardon, what number? 4? That's 4? You're wrong. This is actually an amazing thing to me. You don't care because you don't do this day in and day out, but I swear, almost every time the first guess is telepod, and I deeply resent that because that was my name, that was my suggestion. And I thought it was darn good, and Steve liked it too. I thought it was kind of sci-fi, you know, telepod, but didn't make it. Another guess. Maybe somewhere, oh, there's a hand waving. Which number? 1. Interesting guess, Moby. You're also wrong. Okay, so I promise this won't go more than 5 rounds, okay? Someone over here, maybe? I see a waving light. I like that. 5? 5. Yes? Yes. Okay. Wow, no, another loser, actually. We're getting right down to the nub here. But this actually was the purpose of this little exercise, because iPad, interestingly enough, was a name we came up with for the iPhone 3 years before the iPad appeared. You can win money in a bar with that, I'm sure. Anyone over here? Oh, standing. We have a standing room only person against the door. Move your hand a little bit more this way. There it is. That's a 2, right? Oh, okay. We have a winner. iTalk. Here, I'll put this over here on the stage and you can pick it up later. Okay, so on with the show. We start with a shocker, as these things seems to work. And the shocker is this, that there basically is no such thing as simplicity. And I know that sort of blows my whole presentation, but the point is that everything in this world that looks simple probably isn't. As you well know, every website, every product, every service, it takes a ton of work. There's weeks or months or even years of research and arguing and debating about what the right way to go is, the whole bit. So basically, nothing in this world is as simple as it looks. I think very, very few things, you know, aside from water, are simple. You could look at a tree, for example. It may look like the world's simplest thing, but in fact, we've got leaves, we've got capillaries, we've got all these, the epidermis and all these different things. We have photosynthesis, we have a root system. All these things make it very, very complicated, but anyone on Earth sees a tree and says, simple, it's beautiful. So what we really talk about is the perception of simplicity. And this is a very different thing than simplicity itself. All that really matters in this world, if you're selling anything, product, service, whatever, is whether a customer feels like it was simple. Nothing else really matters. So if you can create that perception of simplicity, you have won. And we'll see during the course of the next half hour or so the many ways that you can help give people that perception of simplicity. There's a scientific basis for simplicity, and that comes from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who is a Hungarian psychologist and a professor now in a California business school. He has this theory called flow, which he's become fairly famous for. And it's an interesting concept. The more I learned about it, flow is a state of mind, basically, that lets you concentrate on what you're doing and you're not distracted by anything around you, none of the bells and whistles. You're following a path, you're happy to be on that path, and you are fulfilled by that path. So if you put it in the form of a chart, flow basically takes you through all these negative things in life. On the really negative side, there's no anxiety, frustration, and fear of failure. On the mental state side of things, you're not bored, you don't have a lack of interest, you are in a state of flow. The more I learned about flow, the more I realized that basically it's a pretty darn good description of simplicity and why it works. Because if something appears to be simple to you, if you go away from the experience feeling, or while you're having the experience, feeling this sense of simplicity, you're not bored, you're focused, and you're not easily distracted by other things. So there's science behind the idea of simplicity. During the course of the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a few principles that I've talked about in my books. One of them is this idea of authenticity. And as an advertising person, this was something that was very near and dear to my heart, but a lot of clients didn't really believe in it as we at the agency did. Normally, if I was tasked with creating a brand campaign for a product, you would have to go through weeks or even months of agonizing reviews trying to decide what it is that the company should be. Only when there is agreement on what the company should be, what it stands for, would creative work begin. So it's a long, long process, and it involves sort of like reinventing what you are. Apple didn't have that problem. Steve Jobs actually did not like advertising that sounded like advertising. So he wasn't standing there saying, I want authenticity, but that is what he was saying. He was saying that Apple has stood for creativity in technology. It has these values, it has always stood for these values. We want to tell the world who Apple is. This was Steve coming back when the company was near bankruptcy in 1997. The first thing he wanted to do when we had no computers to talk about yet was run a brand campaign that would capture the authenticity of Apple so that we could build upon that in the future. So basically, we came up with this idea called Think Different. And the beauty of Think Different, the words, is that they could have been hung in the garage when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak created their very first computer. That's what Apple was all about then. You could use those words today because Apple products are designed, they have this spirit of thinking different. There's a better way to work. We didn't have to try to get people to believe something that we were making up, because if you really thought about what Apple was, the words were natural and appropriate. So Steve was a big fan of the idea, and we did a commercial. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with it down here, but we launched the Think Different campaign with a commercial, and we tried our hardest to get Steve to be the voiceover for it, because we thought, why would we hire someone who's an actor to pretend that he believes these words? Steve loved these words, and you know, you're a natural, Steve. It would be authentic if you were the guy to do the voice. Well, Steve thought that was a bad idea because there were a lot of eyes on Apple at the time because it was going out of business, and he didn't want people to be debating, his ego about why he had to be the voice on the commercial. So he thought he would be a distraction. So he didn't like the idea, but he did allow us to record him one day because we would debate it later. So I flew up to Apple one day with my sound man in tow, and we met Steve, who made us wait probably a good half hour before he stormed into the room and told us he was really, really busy, he was not in a great mood, he thought it was a bad idea, and okay, I'll read it once and then I'm out of here. So it was this little attitude issue, really. But we got the one read out of him, and he did a pretty darn good job with it. So I'm going to play you this commercial. It never ran on television, but it got some notice on YouTube after he passed away because he really did love the words. He thought they perfectly captured the spirit of Apple. So I found online a version of this that has subtitles. The quality is a little lower, but you'll get the idea, and it might help you with the subtitles. There were no titles on this originally. This also tells you who the people are, so on. So you'll have to forgive that. This is the launch commercial for Think Different with Steve reading the voice.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
So a lot of people ask what it was like to work with Steve. Imagine you're in that room when he gave that really nice, soft read of the commercial, and then his words were hanging in the air, are the ones who do. And then there was a moment of silence, and then he sort of said, that's it, it's a horrible idea, and he stormed out of the room. So, like, okay, a little hot and cold, but that could be life in the wacky world of Steve Jobs. So, the beauty of authenticity is that it became a guideline for us. I mean, we were in a very, very complicated situation, having to revive a company that was basically going out of business. And these words became a guideline for us. Basically, no commercial, no ad, no anything, no communication could go out that didn't logically end in the words, think different. And we were going to make that idea stronger and stronger. Apple is a company that thinks different. And then, when we start actually making new products, it will become, the introductions will become a lot more powerful because they stand for something. This one unified, simple vision. So in a little bit, I'll tell you more about that. But Think Different was a perfect setup for the products that followed, and we were acting in good faith because we didn't even know what those products were going to be. Steve said they're going to be awesome, but we didn't know it until we saw them. Another powerful component in the world of simplicity is the choice that you give customers. Everyone knows that choice is good. We want choice, but we also should know that too much choice has a way of choking people and freezing them into inaction. So if you look at the way you grew up, you had some very basic things when we choose. There's good, better, best is something that we all are familiar with. There is small, medium, and large. They're just basic ways to group things. And yet, if you look, I'm kind of technology obsessed, so we'll use laptops as an example. But if you look at the laptops that are out there, this is true as of several months ago. I'm sure it changes every day. But Dell makes 26 distinct models of laptops. They're not just like different screen sizes, they're different models. They look different, they have different features on them. HP can actually outdo Dell. They've got 41 distinct models, and poor old Apple only has 3. The poor part is just a way to be cute about it, because they're far from poor, as we know. Market share, Apple has never had more than 10% of the market. They've been really bad about that. But there's a thing called share of profit, the total available profit to be had in a certain category. And in the category of PCs and tablets, Apple makes more than HP and Dell combined, profit-wise. So the lack of choice hasn't really done them any harm. You could say that Apple does not give you a lack of choice, they give you a lack of confusion. And that is what makes it easy for people to buy from them. And that's all part of the thing that goes to create that perception of simplicity. In writing this last book, I talked to 40 business leaders around the world, and I met some really fascinating people. This one gentleman, Brian Hartzer, is the CEO of the second biggest bank in Australia. And when he took office, he said that he looked at the credit card offerings and was just amazed. There were something like 28 of them. And not only did customers get confused looking at all the options, but his own people couldn't explain the difference when customers asked. So he said, look, there are only a few kinds of people we deal with: young people, older people, business people, and there are only a few kinds of credit cards. There's cashback, frequent flyer, and so on. So he said, we're going to make a grid. We got the users up top, the kinds of cards on the side, and one product goes in every box, and everything else must die. So they did that, and amazingly, sales went up. And he said it's not entirely because of the choices, but he knows it played a major, major part of it, because suddenly customers knew exactly what the choices were, and his salespeople could explain very clearly what the choices were. That goes a long way to motivate people to actually buying something instead of saying, let me think about it. There's this quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who said, perfection is achieved not when there's nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to remove. And this is true not only in product design and in software design, in PowerPoint design. My colleagues and I go back and forth all the time, taking out words and paragraphs and pages to try to distill something down to its essence, because that makes it more perfect. So that's a kind of a highbrow way to look at it. I'm also capable of going very low, so I quote Vídeo, who said, freedom of choice is what you got, freedom from choice is what you want. Now obviously there are shades of that, and you can't make these blanket statements about every kind of business. But we do know that when people have a clear choice that they truly understand and the product differences are distinct, it makes things a lot easier. So I tip my plastic cap to Vídeo for saying it that way. Love. This is a hugely important thing. The thing that Steve Jobs said to us probably more than any other thing was that it was our job to get people to love Apple. He believed that this emotional connection would serve several purposes, actually. First, if people felt that love for Apple, they'd keep buying stuff from Apple, so that's a good thing. But two, they would evangelize to their friends, their families, and their colleagues, and then those people would buy from Apple, and that's also a good thing. But third, he would insulate the company against the unexpected bad thing, because bad things happen even when you plan perfectly. Something, some newsworthy story, some product flaw, or whatever it is that happens to you and you didn't notice, if people have that emotional connection, they'll give you a break and they'll remain customers. You will have loyalty. Whereas if you have none of that, no connection emotionally, people could just leave. So this actually, I found this video, actually I lived through it, when the iPhone 4 came out. That was the first Apple iPhone that had the antenna that went around the edges. And the story was that if you held it a certain way, that you would short out the antenna and lose your call. And that created, literally within 24 hours of that product being released, people were complaining about that. It was getting written up, and Apple was being attacked left and right. to the point where Steve actually had to call a press conference to discuss what he was going to do about that, or explain, you know, whether this was a figment of people's imagination or not. So he had this hour-long press conference, and during that hour I noticed that he was really playing the love card very heavily. So I edited down his 1-hour presentation to a mere 45 seconds to make my point. Where I come from, thanks to Watergate in the 70s, anytime anything bad happens to any company, you stick a gate at the end of it. So this little episode became known as Antenna Gate.
I love you so much.
We want to make all of our users happy. We love making our users happy. We make all our users happy. We care about every user. We want every user to be happy. We care about every user. What motivates us is to just have them love. So we love our users. We love our users so much. We do all this because we love our users. We love our customers. We love our users. We really love them.
I love you so much.
So yeah, that was the Steve Jobs way. It was called the Steve Jobs reality dispersion field by many. He had a way of making you believe things, and this was really not unlike the way he introduced his products. He would distill everything down to a very simple thing that people could remember, and then he'd repeat it over and over and over again, so people would sort of go away saying it. So love, very important to Steve, but Apple certainly reaped the benefits of having this emotional connection with its customers. It keeps building more and more customers who get hooked on the way the company treats them. The language of simplicity. Apple has been really, really good with words, and it's a good thing for me because my background is in writing, and learning to write for Apple and be very human about the way you describe things was very, very important. A lot of Apple's competitors get involved with all these specs, and Apple was always more about the human nature of the products. So every word counts, and actually every letter counts. So this is my lifetime achievement, basically, and as kind of sad as that may be. And I didn't even write that thing, it's part of the alphabet. And you have to keep in mind that I am a writer, so it's a little bit embarrassing that I would be known for a single letter, given that I have written entire paragraphs in my time. But I came from the original iMac, and just another thing that maybe you can win money in a bar someday, I can add to your knowledge, but it started with the iMac, and then all these other i things kind of happened, and more than that, really. And not only did Apple start making i products, but other companies picked up on it, and suddenly there are i products everywhere. I found this one in Copenhagen. It will always be one of my favorites. Funny as it is, that actually captures the reason for the I, and maybe it's too obvious, but the original iMac, you know, we were called into Steve's office not to his office, to his conference room, when the iMac was about 2 weeks away from going into production. It still didn't have a name. So he had a name in his mind that he thought was really, really good, but wondered if we could do better. And this was the way he worked. He would often sort of have something he thought was perfectly fine, but then challenge people to outdo it. So this was the assignment. What should we call this thing? And Steve had this name that he was high on, and his name was MacMan. So think about that one for a while. So our reaction to that was pretty much probably your reaction to it, which was like, what the hell were you thinking? It's a little sexist. You know, it creates the false impression that something is portable, because Walkman was popular at the time from Sony, and it creates the false impression that it's a game machine because it sounds like Pac-Man, which was also popular at the time. So we thought it was a terrible name, and we went to work and it became iMac. And the reason it did was, again, it's so obvious looking back. I'm almost embarrassed. But I for Internet, Mac for Macintosh. The iMac was designed to make it easy to get on the Internet. Back then, it wasn't that easy. You had to buy a separate modem and you had to configure things. And most normal human beings don't, get excited about that. So iMac was designed to fix that, and it seemed kind of logical to me. And it was on the first page I came up with, but then of course, we had to do many, many more pages and put hundreds of names up, but we distilled it down to 5 names, presented them to Steve, and he hated all of them, including iMac. We had to come back a week later with more names, and he still didn't like iMac. I brought him a bunch of new names, but we said, we still like this one from last week. And that time he said, I still don't like it, but I don't hate it, but I still don't like it. So that was encouraging. And then a couple of days later, I found out that Steve was testing it. He had the name put on a model. He was sharing it with people inside Apple, getting good reactions. That was it. There was never any kind of great moment, not even an email, but it suddenly was iMac. And I'm always very thankful that we saved the world from MacMan, because had we not, you could very well be sitting there today with a phone man. And that would be rather embarrassing for all of us. So, iMac, and again, I would say that the power of those words, think different, being so authentic. We had seeded that campaign for more than 6 months before the iMac appeared. You may recall, some of you who have enough years on you, that back in those days, computers were beige and boxy and boring. And this machine came up, which looks a little silly by today's standards, but was just really, really futuristic and utterly unlike anything else back in those days. All we really had to do was put a picture of it on a page and say, think different, because it really, really was different. That was the power of having an authentic theme line. And every product that came after that, the iBook, Airport, things like that, everything paid off think different. And again, those words had to be at the bottom of every ad, so every headline, every visual had to naturally pay off with the words think different. It was a tremendous unifier. When we talk about naming, we could look at those guys who had all those computers we talked about before. HP and their 41 computers, they have names like this. EliteBook, Chromebook, SlateBook, Pavilion, Envy. The names are like really all over the place. And when I was doing this research, I was writing all these things down, everything on their page, a lot of pages, but I'm seeing like HP ZBook and HP Envy. And I get to this one that says HP. And I'm like, what? Is there a word missing here? But no, there really is. There's a laptop called HP with all those other HP laptops. So go figure. And then a personal favorite is Omen, because it's always good to name your product after a classic horror film. None of these words relate to each other. They don't relate to HP. Every new product sort of has to be, thought of from scratch. They're building a sub-brand from scratch with everything they do. It makes it a lot more difficult. It also confuses the hell out of customers. ASUS has become one of my new favorites, and again, these things change very often, so this was true a few months ago. I can't guarantee it's that way today. But they have these, if you go to their, to asus.com, they have these 6 computers on the home page, proudly titled with the name of each. And this is exactly how they appeared, right down to the capitalization. Sometimes it was upper and lowercase, sometimes it was all uppercase. But the point here is that when you name a product in the world of simplification, it's always a nice idea to give the product a name that people can talk about in conversation. So I might say, I really like my new iPhone, or someone else might say, I love my Galaxy. But I've never heard, and none of us will ever hear, anyone say, I really love my Asus ROG G370JW, Human beings don't work that way. So what kind of genius it takes to acknowledge that and name products accordingly will forever perplex me, you know? But companies do that. Apple, of course, the hero of our story, has these 3 laptops, and they're all MacBooks. There's a MacBook Air, which is thin and light. There's a MacBook, which is thinner and lighter. And then there's the MacBook Pro, which is also thinner and slightly heavier than the MacBook Air. So it gets a little confusing, and that'll play out over time, because I think the MacBook Airs are going to go away. But no matter how confusing that may be, it ain't nearly as confusing as 26 models or 41 models. And again, Apple presents what it has in a far more clear way. They're creating the perception of simplicity. Another important principle is the idea of doing fewer things better. And this is something that a lot of companies have trouble doing, because there's this thing called product proliferation, sorry. You make a couple of great products, and it's like, hey, let's make more products, and you start spreading thin your resources, your marketing, your R&D money, and your marketing money. Steve once said, rather famously, that innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. If you compare an iPhone to a Galaxy phone, and by the way, I don't mean to talk down about Galaxies, because some of my best friends use Galaxies. But there are different philosophies, and they appeal to different people. So, you know, let Apple be Apple, let Samsung be Samsung. But there is a different philosophy at work. Apple tries, you know, maybe less effectively than they once did, to limit the number of things they put in a phone for fear of distracting people with things they don't use every day. Whereas Samsung is more prone to just kind of load it up with features. So they have more features, they have more flexibility, and a lot of people like those things. But Apple has always valued the simplicity thing, and they think long and hard before they add something for fear that it might actually be making the total experience more confusing. In 1998, when Steve returned, well, he returned in 97, things got rolling in 98, he actually had that problem that faces a lot of problems today. Apple had over 20 distinct products. There were not just laptops and desktops, there were Newtons, and there were printers, scanners, cameras, all this stuff, and they were all basically mediocre. They didn't have like the best product in any category, but they had a product in every category. So that was a problem, because all their resources were being spread thin. So back at that moment when Steve introduced the iMac in '98, he did something that I think to this day remains the most important thing he ever did. The products were certainly important, but this was a philosophical thing about the nature of the company. And he said on stage that day, we are killing our entire product line, all those 20 plus products, and instead we were going to make 4 things and 4 things only. He kept a couple of products, shouldn't say all of them, but he stood there that day and he introduced the iMac. And the idea was that he was going to have a home and a pro version of a desktop and a laptop. So iMac was the home computer, the pro computer was the Power Mac that went under the desk, the Power Book was the pro laptop, and Mr. Secrecy himself, Steve Jobs, stood there on stage that day and said, we're going to fill in that last square sometime real soon. That's what we're working on now. And indeed, several months later, the iBook came, and at last, the grid was complete. And of course, they've expanded it a bit since, but because, you know, people want more things. Now there are phones, and there was an iPod, and tablets, and all that stuff. But still, you can take every product that Apple makes, and it would fit very neatly on a dining room table. And not many other technology makers can make that statement. They put all their resources into these 4 things back then, and the idea was that they would no longer make a mediocre anything. They would make only a world-leading product in each of the 4 categories. That was the moment when Apple was able to begin charging more money because they had this quality and design thing going, and they started building this, you know, this enthusiastic customer base. So without that decision, Apple would never have recovered, and they would, I don't think, be what they are today. So that was a pretty darn bold one, though. You don't usually see the CEO of a company kill his whole product line, but Steve did exactly that. Minimizing, hugely important. You could argue that it is the essence of simplification. So, as an example here, I turn to Apple University, which is something that Steve started, and the idea was that incoming executives should understand what Apple stands for, why they made decisions, important decisions that they made in the past. So they would look at all these case studies about why iTunes appeared on PCs, because that was a big debate. Why apps appeared on the iPhone, because Steve Jobs was adamant there would be no apps on the original iPhone. They changed his mind, his people changed his mind. There are a lot of things like that where Apple failed doing certain things and succeeded in others. So the idea is to understand how Apple succeeds, and perhaps that will help people make decisions in the future. One of the visual aids they use at Apple U is a series of water drawings by Picasso. He actually did 12 drawings over a period of 12 days. I left one out, so I was able to give him credit in the 12th space. But it's interesting what he did. He started with a very detailed version of a bowl, and then he got a little arty with it, as Picasso could do. And then from there, he just minimized, and he minimized more. And when you get to the very end, he has nothing but a few scant lines with a distinct shape. And the wonderful thing about this is, you can look at that minimized version at the end, and it still says bull. There's no mistaking what that is, yet it is more aesthetically pleasing and more memorable because it's an artistic rendering of the bull. So this principle is the thing that Apple teaches that should be kept in mind when it comes to product design and communications. That you don't have to say everything to say everything. You can cut what you're presenting to the public and not miss anything important. But what you're showing is more aesthetically pleasing and more memorable. And I think that's just a hugely important principle when you simplify anything. Steve himself once said that we make progress by eliminating things, by removing the superfluous. And I think that's a very good way to say it, because there are an awful lot of things in this world that are superfluous. And I'm sure you find that in various jobs that there are always people campaigning to have something in that could easily be left out. And by taking it out, you make what's left even more powerful, important way of working. This is a moment to talk about culture. So I say that simplicity is in the air. Inside Apple, I was always curious when I got together with people who were about to take things to Steve. Like before one of his product unveilings, you would see the product managers getting their part of the presentation together to show Steve, and he would then decide how he wanted to present it in the show. And inside Apple, they were sort of, it was part of the culture. You know, you understood that simplicity was one of Steve's great values, and you were about to see Steve, it had better be simple. So they helped each other. They would sort of do, you know, test run of their presentation and help each other distill things down to its essence so that Steve would be more receptive to it. So it's part of the culture and it feeds on itself. This is a little clip, not entirely relevant, but it's one of my favorites, so I share it with you, because it does talk about the culture thing, only at the end. Steve did an interview with a journalist, and one of the questions was, what do you think of Microsoft? And he gave this answer, which just, I always laugh, I'm sorry, so I'm forcing you to listen to it with me. But it gets to the culture thing at the end.
The only problem with Microsoft is they just have no taste. They have absolutely no taste. And what that means is, I don't mean that in a small way, I mean that in a big way. In the sense that they don't think of original ideas, and they don't bring much culture into their product.
So that's the thing that I love so much. I love that they don't have any taste. I don't mean that in a small way, I mean that in a big way. again, there are not a lot of CEOs out there who take these kind of bold views of what other people are doing. But I think that's very true, and I've talked about this very often. I think Steve in particular had great taste. You could argue that that taste is no longer at Apple today, but to a degree certainly. Steve really did have good taste, and he nixed things that were in bad taste. A lot of companies are unable to do that. But he was talking about bringing culture into the product. So Apple had this culture of simplicity. So it was no mistake that the products that came out and the processes that led to the products, the processes that guided the way things were developed and then ended up as a real product, those things were always simplified because there was a culture of simplicity. So Apple is very good at that. Someone else I talked to when I was writing this new book is this gentleman, Ted Jung, who's the vice chairman of Hyundai Card in South Korea. It's a credit card company. And it was losing $2 billion a year when he took the job 10 years ago, 12 years ago now. Now it is making more than $1 billion in profit. So it has done a total turnaround. And he's a really cool guy. I had a great time visiting with him. But he talked all about the culture, about how he changed that culture. It was a credit card company that was boring. It was just unexciting to work there. And he changed it with this culture of design. It's a little hard to describe, but the credit cards themselves are very artistic, and all the communications they did were designed to appeal to people's sense of design and being part of a lifestyle that was sensitive to design. The kinds of things they would sponsor. So it was this thing that spread throughout the company, was the value of great design and an elegant lifestyle that literally turned an entire company around. I mean, there were a lot of other factors as well, but he really stressed the importance of the culture. And culture is a very difficult thing to change. I'm sure you've read books on the topic. It's not the kind of thing you can do overnight, but a great leader can find ways to do that. Last is the idea of thinking outside the bubble. And I put it this way because I think we all live in our own particular bubbles. We work for companies, and even though we think we're being sensitive to what's outside, if you ask a lot of people about why they did something one way or another that doesn't seem ideal, you get an answer that has some compromise built into it. Well, we couldn't do that for this reason, or there was a money issue, or whatever it is. But none of that really matters to someone viewing it from the outside. So the idea, and I think Steve Jobs was really good at this, was looking at the company as a complete outside customer would see it. So that had to do with the whole experience, and customer experience was always the deciding factor. If there were two ways to do something, one way created a better customer experience, we would go with that way. If it were more expensive, Steve would say, oh, I still want to go with that way, but now your job is to find a way to do it cheaper. So there was no way to win, but he would never compromise. It was always about meeting the standards. So some of these things only become apparent when you really stand back and look outside. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the idea of skunk works. The idea of skunk works is that it's a small group, usually a small group, that works outside the normal organization in a company. I've worked on a couple of things in my life where the CEO set up a skunk works to come up with a new campaign because he didn't want to go through his normal ad agency, or he didn't want to go through his normal marketing department. He wanted just this pure thing. The idea, the name actually came from Lockheed Martin. Back in the 1940s, and this is actually a thing at Lockheed. They did it as two words back then, skunk and works. This was, and I believe still is, because it exists today, their logo, professional as it seems. The idea, though, was that they rented a circus tent and they put it outside the company to do this job that was demanded of them by the Defense Department. There was the German threat. They needed a new airplane. They said, you guys got to find a way to give us this new plane on time and on budget because the country the country's survival depends on it. So they set up this circus tent and they put their best people in it and they put a guy in charge and they did the project. They created the plane on time and on budget. So when I heard this, it actually reminded me of, it's going to seem a little weird to you, but I saw a comedian once in San Francisco on amateur night. And he had a routine where he talked about the black box in airplanes and how no matter what happens, what disaster, fires, crashes, underwater for months at a time, the black box always reveals its data. The data is intact. And he said, why don't they just build a whole plane out of that stuff? You know? So when I heard about Skunk Works, and it works better, people worked faster, did better products, and they did it on budget, it's kind of like, why don't they build the whole company out of that stuff? I don't understand why you'd have like a separate group that operates outside the bureaucracy when it's clearly a better way to work. So this is something that I talked to all these business leaders when I wrote this last book, and the idea came out very, very often about being able to stand outside your company and look at it and make decisions that you know a customer would appreciate and not worry so much about what can or can't be done. And to look at your company and realize that a lot of the processes may be antiquated. Why are we doing things this way when it's so much better to do it another way? So basically, the idea here is that if you want to improve your company or your organization, the best idea may well be to build a circus tent, really. But I mean this metaphorically, because if you kind of put your brain outside of your company for a bit, what you need to do can become a lot more clear. And I think the advice that all of these people gave me seemed pretty darn good. So the bottom line is that being simple is not simple. It takes a ton of work, and I think what made Steve such a great leader was he had this love of simplicity. He loved a simple idea, but he was also a brutal foe of complexity. And I think you hear the stories about him exploding with his temper. More times than not, it was because people were trying to make things more complicated than they needed to be. He had a clear vision, didn't want to compromise on that vision. But you don't make a lot of friends doing that. So that was the rough side of Steve, because he was a purist, and he believed in this principle and didn't like it to be made more complicated. It's this lens, really. I think for Steve, it was interesting, whether it was an ad or a product, whatever it was that was sitting on the table. I saw him do it with name badges when they were redesigning the name badge at Apple. You can almost see the wheels spinning in his head, that he was kind of trying to figure out whether it was simple enough and clear enough and memorable enough. So he had this lens he saw things through, and it's an important talent to nurture in yourself, I think. My favorite quote from Steve is this one: simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. And I meet a lot of smart people in my travels, and somebody could have said this to me at some point. And honestly, I'm not sure how much I remember it, because I don't know who says what their credentials are. But the fact that this is Steve Jobs, and he basically took a company that was near bankruptcy in 1997, and he turned it into the world's most valuable company, the entire planet, in just 14 years. That's a pretty amazing journey. And he's saying basically that simplicity was his philosophy. So he said that, but he didn't say it quite as simply as he could have. You know, I try to help the guy out a little bit. His way had a bit more elegance to it, so I go with him on this one. But the idea is that simplicity does in fact move mountains. So this appears to be the end. You've been very attentive, and I know you have a whole day. It only appears to be the end. You fell for it. Because it's near the end of the day, I have a little fun thing for you, and I hope I'm not wearing out my welcome. But I have a little side thing I do with my former Apple designer, We do this purely for fun. We don't make any money whatsoever. But, you know, like Steve liked to have fun. He used to love when he'd see parody on television about Apple. So we created a site called Scupertino. We don't make any money, like I say, it's just done for pure love. And we take the stories that are often out there, negative often, about Apple. They want to run the world, all they care about is your money. They don't really invent anything themselves. All these things that we personally do not believe, but they make fun stories. So I'm just going to share 2 of them with you. The first one is back when the iPhone 4 came out. I told you we had that problem with the antenna. So we came out with a new product called iHand. And the idea was that it was a wooden hand that you would hold in your hand. So, you know, the problem with the antenna was basically you and your fleshy fingers. You would short out the antenna, and this would ensure that that not be the case. We think of all the details here. We have the different colors on the bottom for different races, including iHand Kermit down there, the green one in the lower right. And we put a telescoping rod in the wrist because we thought you'd want to hold it at a comfortable distance to your ear. Or possibly you'd like to hold it to the ear of a colleague. The option is yours. And then we came up with a fake product called Apple Water. Way ahead of its time because we didn't call it iWater, we called it Apple Water. I should have pointed out earlier when I was talking about the I, that the I is on its way out. We have Apple Pay, Apple Music, Apple Watch. But years ago, we came up with Apple Water. Clean, simple, wet. And the idea was that if Apple was going to do a new product like water, what would it look like? So we did this, and people write comments on the site they think we're serious. They think it's really from Apple, and they find it outrageous that Apple is making water, and somebody would have to write a comment under theirs saying, it's a joke, idiot. So people debate with themselves there. But you'll see, you can't see, I'll have to read it to you. We put some captions up there like Apple would do if they were presenting something. So we have on the lower left of that bottle, it says, molecular perfection. Literally twice as many hydrogen atoms as there are oxygen atoms. You know? Only from Apple, right? Because Apple doesn't really invent everything themselves. So we did an ad for Apple Water. If you're an Apple fanboy, you've got Apple on the outside. Now you can have it on the inside. And we came up with a new fake product, a sister product to go with Apple Water, which we call Apple Water Pro. So there you have it. That's the wild world of Scupertino. Scupertino, unfortunately, is having some technical difficulties and disappeared some months ago. It's coming back as a Facebook page, which is going to make our lives much easier, but we're going to start redoing all of our old stories and add new ones on Facebook. So if you're ever in the mood for a laugh, go to Scupertino on Facebook, and it's going to become much more active in coming weeks. So that actually is the end. Now I'm finished. You may begin drinking, whatever you're doing.